Oh, hello, Bill.
Oh,
Oh, hi, Bill.
how you doing?
Yeah, good. Thank you. How's everything? How's everything going? Thank you for taking the time to chat to me, by the way. And
Sure.
thanks for being part of the book as well. And I just wanted to say I will get your Star Wars book as well. I think I need to get it. So um, the
I guess that there's my book.
oh, brilliant.
It has a chapter on the mask. Let me move my hand here so you can see it better. That's my shot, SB-19 on the cover.
Oh, wow.
Took me a lot of effort through lawyers and stuff to get permission to use that shot.
I can
And
imagine.
That's on the back is a picture of Back to the Future. That was when they went back to the Old West. And
How was that? Was that also trouble getting that photo, or was that
that one, no, because I got a nice quote from Spielberg. I always thought that ILM, if ILM had run the space agency, we'd have colonized Mars by now. That one was not so difficult because in ILM's contracts with motion picture studios, the photographs that are taken during the production of the visual effects, they have the rights to use those. But when Disney purchased Lucasfilm, some new orders came down about how you could or could not use any stills that were from Star Wars. And so I convinced them that this still is not from the movie itself. This still was made up by our photographic department as a publicity still. In other words, they took all of the elements and they composited them together as if it was taken from the film. It even has a little blur on it, like most motion picture films do when you just take one single frame of a moving object or a normal film. And if that little bit of motion blur was not there, you would get a very staccato looking motion picture image that you wouldn't like. So sometimes we add it in. So to your point about the mask, so I was working, I worked for Industrial Light and Magic for about 20 years. I'm up at my ranch now, which was ILM allowed me to have a ranch. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. I live in the East Bay Hills. I look right at the Golden Gate Bridge. But when it gets too foggy in the summer, I come up here. I first heard about the fact that we were going to make work on this film called The Mask. And the thing that I read, and I'm pretty sure this was the movie. After we started working on it, I was looking at what other productions we were up against. And I read the title of one, and it was called Boogie Nights. And I thought, well, that's going to be no competition. What a silly sounding name for a movie. Of course, as we all know now, it turned out to be a landmark movie and put the director
on the map
in the big time, let's say. So as opposed to that, The Mask had Jim Carrey as one of the principal actors, and the actress, remind me of her name. I don't have it in front of me.
Cameron Diaz.
Cameron Diaz, right? Okay, so the rumor was, this is just like film studio scuttlebutt. The rumor was that, well, this Cameron Diaz, she was a magazine model, and the director took a fancy to her, and he was maybe the director's girlfriend or something. Well, of course, it turned out that was not true, and it made her career. She was a fine actress and has proven to be so. Jim Carrey, on the other hand, had done a couple of films that were going to be blockbusters, but they hadn't been released yet, so no one knew who the heck he was. And so I used to go out to the main stage and watch them shoot when I wasn't busy doing my editing chores. I was a visual effects editor there. I worked on a lot of films, from Star Wars to
The Abyss.
Saving Private Ryan.
The Abyss. And also you worked, it's funny as well, Bill, you worked on Gangs of New York as well, which also...
I worked on Gangs of New York, right.
That had Cameron in as well. That had Cameron Diaz in as well.
That's correct. One of my favorite scenes in that movie is where, now correct me if I'm wrong, the principal actor is on a streetcar or something, excuse me, and this woman picks his pocket, takes his wallet or watch or something, and he follows her off the trolley and up the street and confronts her, and she pulls a knife on him, and they have this struggle where she's got the knife right at his throat, and he disarms her, and then there's this beautiful little pause, and he says to her, "You want to go out?" I thought that was such a great line. All this steady cam leading up to this moment of violence, and then he says, "Hey, do you want to go out?" And of course she does. But what I was saying was I used to go out to the stage and watch them shooting, and nobody knew who Jim Carrey was. I mean, we had heard rumors that this was I believe an $18 million production, and the studio wasn't happy with his salary. They were probably still negotiating it, and he was a nobody, but he was so funny. He was such a brilliant mimic that I've seen clips. There's one of him on YouTube where he's doing some impersonations, and a couple of them, you just can't believe what he's able to accomplish.
The genius. The genius.
Yeah. It just his facial expressions, but it's more than that. And so we had this producer, Cliff, and he was kind of an annoying guy. I mean, I think even Cliff would admit he was kind of an annoying guy, and the production got sick of him and kind of straightened him out, though, because they had the power to say, "Look, buddy, you're not running this show. This is our movie." But anyway, Carrey decided to do an impression of this guy when he was not there, and it was uncanny. To this day, I couldn't go back and say how he became Cliff, but for a few moments he was able to do it, and it was the subtlest of things. So that to me was a sign that Carrey was something special. And of course, when his two films were later released, I mean, they were massive hits, and he and Cameron both became movie stars. So The Mask is also one of the few films. Usually the director does not like to show his film around before it's to be fair, before it's been edited and the music's been added and the dialogue has been replaced so you can hear everyone clearly and the sound effects are put in. Most people don't realize that motion pictures are shot basically silent. They have a little rough track there, but they are silent. And they go in and re-record everything from a door closing, a dog barking, or the dialogue itself, which is done through a process, or it used to be called ADR, automatic
ADR. Yeah, that's right.
dialogue replacement. So the actor watches himself on the screen. He has a set of headphones where he hears the dialogue that he gave on the set, and he repeats it until they get perfect lip sync. This is why your home movies don't look as good as Hollywood movies. So we were allowed to look at the movie as it was, The Mask, and I took home a VHS copy and watched it. And you could tell right there, it was funny as hell. And this was going to be, it had no visual effects in it. It had nothing. It was just the actors playing off each other. And it opened with this rather strange
Vikings.
Yeah, that we were supposed to help them with, and we worked on it. And they are burying the mask on a desert island or something, because it has turned, as far as they were concerned, into very bad luck.
It's like curse, yeah. It was a curse.
Yeah, it was a cursed thing. Exactly. So at some point, the director just cut that off the movie, just clipped it off completely. And the movie starts, I think, with the bank scene, or, near there. And it just plays beautifully without that. And I think anyone who's a writer or a filmmaker comes to a point where they realize that some of their introduction doesn't really, you want to hit the ground running. You want to start right in the middle of a scene or right in the middle of action and just go. And you get to this realization after you've pondered the film and shown it and looked at it a zillion times on your viewing device. In those days, it was a Kim editing machine. You come to certain realizations about how the dramatic storyline has to work, and how little time you have to set up your story elements and get the thing going and have something exciting happen. And once that happens, you've got the audience in the palm of your hand. And, this is something that George Lucas taught me. And he would open with a spectacular shot, of a Star Destroyer coming overhead, seemingly endlessly on and on and on. We used to call them beauty shots. And once you've knocked the audience out with whatever it is, it could be a dramatic thing or it could be an effects thing. Once you've done that, now you've got their attention. And that's how you make good movies. It's not that easy.
You want to hook them in, don't you? You want to get them in. You want to,
right. They need to get religion, and it's going to be your storytelling religion. And once they're comfortable with you, then they're going to lean back and just forget about. I've taught film a little bit now and then, trying to give back some of the things I've learned. And I tell students that it's something Francis Coppola told me, which was, he said, when I go to a movie, I don't sit down and cross my arms and say, okay, show me. He said, I think, oh, gee, I'm going to see a movie and this is going to be fun. And I'm so excited because I know how hard movies are to make, and I really want to enjoy this. And that's how I try to approach it as well, until the movie starts to fail, and you see the director lost control of it somewhere. Now, sometimes these are things that you can watch and you will learn a lot more from a bad movie than you'll ever learn from a good movie. A good movie, you sit down, you get so involved in it, you sort of don't remember when you turned into a captive audience, and then the movie's over and you were like, what happened? That was great, but I don't remember why it was great. Maybe I need to watch it again.
It's funny you say that, you know, because there's one particular film I think that you worked on that was a bit like that, you know, and it made me. I watched it again recently. Starman. It was
Yes, right.
It was, you know, it was a romantic film, but it was so touching. It was so sad, you know. I mean, it was beautifully acted, Jeff Bridges, and it was just such a film I hadn't seen for so long. And rewatching it again, I realised it was such a well constructed film.
Right, better than you thought. Yeah, it's you know, it's like the New York Times bestseller list. After about 10 years, you go back and look at some of those books and they're not so hot. But there'll be books that you missed or maybe gave a short shrift to, that now seem to really be good. And you know, that's the art of it. Some of the really great films were passed over. Some of the Bogart films were not thought much of at the time, and we look back at them now, and you know, they're great. You know,
Classics. Yeah.
Yeah, It's a Wonderful Life is a perfect example of one that just didn't do anything really, and now it's a classic. We watch it every Christmas. Everyone watches it. So The Mask, I think, turned out to be a really good film, and in large part, it was Jim Carrey and Cameron and the director, but also our animation, computer animation, was able to enhance this thing in ways that were just surprising and funny.
Transcending.
Yes,
Totally.
exactly.
It was transcendental. I mean, it was like you had the actors. It all came together. The visual, the look, the direction, the costuming, the music. It all came together. You know, and it was a transcending experience.
And that's one of the difficult things to do when you plop visual effects down into a storyline movie. You have to be very careful in how to integrate these things, and it takes some time and testing, as far as like when we did Roger Rabbit, but all the animation had to be done as pencil tests first. In other words, we would just do a brief shorthand animation over the live action background. We would composite it and send it to the director, and he would cut it in and see if it was working with everything else. You know, were the scenes working? Did he need another scene or one less scene, or just how it worked? And it's the same with something, a movie like The Mask. You need to see how it integrates in some simple way, and then you can say, okay, let's go ahead with these shots, because you know these shots can cost $200,000-$300,000 a piece, and if you can drop one, or God forbid add one, you know, it has a big impact on the budget. And so we had a fantastic crew of animators. Excuse me.
Dreamquest and ILM.
Yeah, correct. And so probably the most famous sequence is the nightclub sequence. And it's all sort of a tribute to Tex Avery and other of the
Warner Brothers
yeah,
cartoons. Yeah.
classic animation. So funny, so beautifully rendered. You know, when I was a little kid and I would watch cartoons like every other little kid, some of them seemed so much better to me than others. And I wasn't old enough to distinguish what it was, but I knew there was a difference. There was, you know, when you saw certain cartoons, they were so elegant compared to others that didn't, I mean, they were still watchable, but they just didn't have that magic. And so I would say that some of the animation in The Mask had that magic. It was a lot of it was done by Steve
Steve
Williams,
Williams.
who
Steve
everyone
Williams.
calls
Spaz.
Spaz,
Spaz.
because
Yeah.
like that giant kid in your high school that everybody called Tiny. That's why we called him Spaz, because he was brilliant. He was the first guy I ever met, or gal for that matter, who was an artist in a new way. In other words, technical people were in the past often people walking around with pocket protectors and, you know, with the thick glasses and stuff. I mean, that was the sort of rub that they had to live with. And Steve comes along and he is a beautiful artist, highly technical, mathematic skills off the
Genius.
charts.
Total genius. Yeah.
And he's a motorcycle riding, you know, wife beater t-shirt wearing, leather jacketed renegade who goofed off all day and then worked all night on animation and just came up with amazing stuff. So he, you know, of course, was central to doing the animation of the dinosaurs in the first Jurassic Park, which was a complete knockout for Hollywood. It was all going to be done stop animation, and Steve did a test, and Spielberg saw that and said, okay, we're doing the whole movie computer animation after that, after seeing what he was able to do. He and others, I mean, Dennis Muren, and there were other fellow workers, but he's the one I knew the best, and he was the most fun to hang out with. And so he would bring stuff into dailies for The Mask that was extraordinary, was funny, had just that extra bit of business that he would put in to his animation. And it must have been a delight for the director to receive this stuff in his cutting room. I mean, we classified all of our effects shots as either temp, CBB, or final. CBB meant could be better. In other words, we're not embarrassed for you to cut this into your movie. And if we have time, if we don't like totally run out of time, it can be in your movie, and no one is going to know that notice any difference. Maybe some little kid in Japan who used to write us letters, and he would say, and my supervisor at the time, Ken Ralston, would say, okay, we're going to do this one more time because I don't want to get another letter from this kid saying that he saw something. And then we would go back and redo them, almost always did, because there was time. We somehow made time. And then we would call it a final. So you could see every day, every week, every month, the progression of these shots. And once we said final, boxed them up and sent them down to the director, and he cut them in. I just know that there was a happy director down there somewhere, because he got more than he asked for. I remember one time we did this shot. It was for a Clint Eastwood movie, and it was the one, I think it's called a blood work, and it's about a cop who gets shot in a
Jimmy Woods,
convenience
James
store
Woods as well.
in the first scene. Right. And so one of the shots that Clint needed was from the security camera in the video store. So we did a temp, you know, like we always do. We'd send a temp, he cut it in, said fine. And then we moved on. And eventually we went back and we really did that shot the way we wanted it and sent it to him. Proud of what we'd done. And he called up and he says, no, I don't, it needs to look like that first thing you sent, you know, because it's from a video camera. I want it to look sort of awful, you know, and grainy and screwed up, because that's what it would look like in real life.
Like gritty, like realistic.
Yeah, exactly. And so there's a lesson, you know, you have to, one of the reasons they hired me, I was told, was because I'd worked for like 12 years as a live action editor in documentaries, and I made a couple of I made one feature film and a classic documentary, and I'd worked on tons of them in a post-production house where I learned how to make movies. And that is because that people that work on visual effects tend to focus in to an uncommon extent on a given shot, and not in keeping in mind that this is just one shot in a sequence of shots, and that has to be kept in mind. So I tried to do that. I tried to bring that to any movies that I worked on. You know, I'm not going to microscope this shot. I'm going to do a good job, but I realize that it's in context of a lot of shots, some of which are not ours. We almost always got, I think we always got the sequence that our shot was in, you know, so we would see the live action of surrounding it. But as I said before, not always the whole movie, because, you know, if somebody doesn't like the movie, if part of the crew starts picking it apart and a word sort of leaks out to the studio that we got a bomb on our hands here, according to, you know, maybe that's not good. And also, directors want their work to be a surprise to their audience, of course. And so they don't, when other directors came to ILM, of course, we were very secretive about anything we were working on for Spielberg or Scorsese or anyone else.
Or Cameron, or
yeah,
this goes on.
Because it means we want to protect it, not protect our secrets, but protect the audience. We don't want spoilers out.
Surprise. You want the surprise. You know, you want people to go in there and be wow. You know, you want it to be a surprise. Totally. You know, it's
exactly. So that's why we honored that, not because we were because we were the place where Star Wars was made. We had to be secretive. I mean, the front door said Kerner Optical Research instead of, you know, here's where we're making Star Wars. And when we were out shooting, we would have a cover name. Blue Harvest is one that comes to mind, because people ask you what movie are you working
like
on.
Like a code name.
Yeah, and you can
and
say
also
yeah.
What you have today as well is you have to sign non-disclosures, and they take your phone off you, and you have to sign contracts, and because the internet, it's the internet now. Whereas I think when you started, you didn't have the internet, so it was a little easier to sort of hide things, you know. And I think
exactly.
Now the internet's just it's hard to hide things, you know. It's there's photographers on the set, you know. There's people sneaking on the set, getting pictures, or I mean,
Exactly.
it's like the other day I saw in the UK they're filming The Flash with Michael Keaton as Batman, and they photographers were, they were getting loads of, they've been leaking photos online, and
Really.
it's so hard to stop it now,
Well, I have a friend whose daughter is married to a guy who was he wasn't paparazzi, but he was in a position to get pictures of famous people occasionally, and the market for the dollars available for certain movie stars, in their real life role, can be hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I understand that, there's a market there, but we're on the other side. One time a lady came into the outer office where the receptionist was at ILM. We're in the Canal District in Marin County. Marin County is a bedroom community just across the Golden Gate Bridge from San Francisco. But we are not out at the beautiful Skywalker 5,000-acre ranch that has been fine-tuned and is just gorgeous, because we blow stuff up, and we would make smoke and raise hell. So we couldn't be with polite people. We had our own area. And if you look on a real estate map, there will be a listing, a zoning for areas that we were in, and it is zoned light industrial. So all George had to do was add the word magic, and you had industrial light and magic. Exactly. So this lady, one day, she sees the sign that says Kerner up. She comes in and she looks at the receptionist, and some of my buddies are sitting around in the lobby wasting time, and she says very suspiciously, "What is it you actually do here?" And Mike Fulmer, who is like an ex-Marine, special forces guy, who's a brilliant model maker, he says, "We manufacture and test rectal thermometers." And everyone got a huge laugh on that. And I don't know what the lady did, but she exited. We also had kids going through the garbage cans and stuff, because the model shop would throw things away. Like I'm sure somewhere there is a cast of Jim Carrey's face, so they could do all of the animation that they needed to do to marry it in computer graphics to the real Jim Carrey, who was running around with a green sock on his head, so we could replace his face. And I've got a few stills of him doing his antics, because we would take black and white still photographs of all the frames in a sequence sometimes, so that we could do tests that could be laid over the background, which was eventually going to be married, because in those days, of course, we were doing compositing. We were doing computer animation, but and that was all digital, but we were combining that. We would scan that animation out and combine it with the 35 millimeter negative in a composite. And because films had to be released on film at that time, a lot easier now where it can be released. You didn't have this intervening step. And so I don't know if you want me to tell stories about other movies, or
I mean, I'm fascinated, because I think it's great to know about your sort of career and your your resume and kind of all the things that you do.
Okay. Well, let me tell you something about Schindler's List. Now, Steven Spielberg had decided that this needed to be shot in black and white. And anybody who's familiar with the brilliant cinematography of those 30s movies, when you see them on the big screen, on film, they were not only shot in black and white, they were lit by people who were masters, and also the people who processed the film. They're all gone now. They're all past or they're retired, but there used to be this fantastic group of technicians who could help you spit out a glorious Fred Astaire movie, for instance. Well, pretty tough to get a studio to release a movie in black and white, because at that time when Schindler was done, the largest part of revenue coming from motion pictures was ironically coming from the VHS tapes that they were selling. We hadn't even gotten to DVDs, I don't think, yet.
Was it Laserdisc or just? I think it was just VHS, wasn't it?
Yes.
DVD, yeah.
So initially, Hollywood was suing everybody to try and stop these VHS tapes being made. They lost all the way to the Supreme Court. And
Wow.
the first sale doctrine was, look, if a person buys a VHS, he can rent it to the general public. That's perfectly within the rights that he has purchased. And so anyway, so videotape was a big deal, and eventually it saved Hollywood from disaster, where they made so much money on these films, not only their new films, but their whole library of films. And there, I went to a convention in Las Vegas, a video dealers convention. I mean, these guys were, it was amazing. They built a booth for the movie Cocoon that supposedly cost $1 million. There was that much money flooding in from,
wow.
When you think about it, everybody who has a television in the world wanted to have movies in their home. So Spielberg says he's going to make his movie in black and white in the studio. So we tried to do some tests to please him by taking film that he had shot and then converting it to black and white through optical tricks. And it looked pretty good, but it wasn't that crisp, beautiful black and white that he wanted. Okay. So there were a couple of problems, because there was the little girl in the red dress. And how do you have a black and white movie, which it had to be black and white, and have a girl in a little red dress? Now today, with computer graphics, you could do that.
Oh, easily. Yeah.
Yes,
yeah,
but the only way at the time to do that was you couldn't do it. There wasn't any way to do it. You can't release a movie in black and white and have one scene or several scenes in color. And the only way we could think it could possibly be done was to take those scenes and print them onto a color stock, and through optical manipulation, hold out the girl in the red dress. But that would mean that someone would have to cut these shots into the release prints. So they were going to start out with 5,000 release prints. Well, you don't want splices in your release prints to begin with. And the idea that the studio would go for this and pay to have somebody cut a number of scenes into the final release prints that are going to be distributed all over the world, I didn't think that they were going to allow that. But that's the way they did it. And you had to be Steven Spielberg to get a degree to all that. And the movie was a huge hit.
And it was a huge hit because wasn't if I'm right in thinking, I am right. I think I am. It's that I think Schindler's was made. It was made before Jurassic.
Yes, because um, we didn't have that ability yet. In other words, as I was saying, if we had had the computer graphic chops, uh, there would have been a way to do it that was reasonable. We had to do the unreasonable way to do it, but got it done. And,
Exactly.
you know, now it's just a little tiny detail of movie history.
It's funny because
Which,
Bill, as well. It's like I was talking to Joey Alter and Scott Squires, who were kind of all part of ILM as well, and
oh, yes,
they were literally it was going from one project to the next, and it was like, so say for instance, like The Abyss, and then they did T2, and obviously The Abyss helped them develop the kind of liquid effects for T2, so it was like,
exactly.
it was like one step, they were just going up each time, and it was just,
And it didn't help, it didn't hurt having this young sort of ex-film student kid who ran around as an intern originally by the name of John Knoll. And John would, he worked back in the mat department, and then he got laid off, and people were trying to figure out some way to find work for him. And I remember him sitting up in the front office, going to have a meeting and find out if he could stay on, all this stuff. Well, John at night was working on something with his brother. Now, John is famously a brilliant person and is a major visual effects director at ILM today. But we used to kid that, John actually has an older, smarter brother back in Michigan. When he gets stuck on something, he calls his older brother, and then he helps him out. We thought that was very funny because John, at home, fooling around with his computer, invented Photoshop. And when he got stuck, his brother helped him with Photoshop. And Photoshop is probably, after like Windows or something huge like that, one of the most successful computer programs probably ever created.
Absolutely.
So John was using some of this technology to do the water snake in The Abyss, and was around at the creation of this wonderful coming together of animation and computers with things like the early Pixar stuff, which all grew, of course, out of the computer division at ILM, and was eventually purchased by Steve Jobs, because George didn't have another $50 million to put into it and develop it like Steven did. So those elements, it was fun to see them there. Like, for instance, when the computer animation had hired this guy named John Lasseter, who became famous for Toy Story. But he was nobody to me. They would call me up and say, can we come bring something over and look at it in your screening room? I was running effects editorial at the time. I said, sure, come on over and I'll run it for you. So they would bring over tests. And one time they brought over a almost final version of a thing they called Luxo Junior. Well, if you've ever seen a Pixar movie, during the titles, when Pixar comes on, there's this little Luxo lamp that's sort of bouncing around. Well, that's what they brought to my screening room as a test. And I thought to myself, after watching it, if this guy John can get that much emotion out of a Luxo lamp, he must be something special. And he was. So it's fun to see that kind of stuff
That's interesting.
around.
Ah,
And Jim Carrey was, another one of those little things that happened there. And maybe nobody noticed. I noticed it. I wrote about it. I tried to put as many of these stories as I could in my book. I also pulled things down off the walls or out of garbage cans that were going to be thrown away. And I have photos of some of those in my book. So if you're interested in seeing or reading those stories,
definitely
that's
get the book.
a place you can start. If you're a film student or something, I suggest you read it to see what you're in for. I tell people, if you really want to work in Hollywood, you're probably going to be able to do it. But I can't guarantee you're going to like it. It may not be for you. So get an internship if you can somewhere and try it out for a while and get a sense of it, because that's the real deal. When we had interns, they got into the mix with us all. And we were so, I think, kind of secretly delighted to have them, because we were old, worn war horses that had been through the mill and had seen it all kind of, and we're a little cynical. I mean, after all, how many times can you hear the phrase, many Bothans died to bring you this information? I mean, you start making fun of it. But these young people, they were just incredibly enthusiastic about everything. And that enthusiasm leaked over to us old guys, and it was a wonderful pairing, because these were some of the brightest people that they could find in universities. We had guys from England, and we had guys from all over the world, and some gals. They couldn't seem to figure out how to get more Black students. There was a couple, but they were harder to, I was trying to get them to, you have to go out and search for them, because they're not going to be knocking on the door here. So we did the best that we could there.
The best you could.
Excuse
me.
Yeah. So what more could I tell you about The Mask?
I mean, I suppose you kind of, I'm guessing, your kind of your favorite sequences in the film. I'm guessing that was kind of Steve's work, the tongue, the dance sequences, the dog. I mean, I think that was great how they did the dog as well.
Yeah. So I've got a little. Can I get something and bring it and show it to you?
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah.
Okay. Hold on a second. Okay. I don't know if you can see.
Oh,
this.
Wow. Yeah, I can see it. Yeah. Chuck showed me this as well.
Oh,
Chuck,
okay.
Chuck,
Good.
Charles Russell, he showed me this as well. Yeah, that's amazing.
So the crew was given, we were each given one of these in a plastic case. And that was the idea of doing the dog, I think, was kind of special in the sense that I think it really worked with the audience. It was a topper to the, sort of to the joke of the movie. The humor brought it home.
Yeah, really, it's like just a real crowd pleaser as well, because
Exactly.
it was an absolute crowd pleaser. I mean, I'm guessing whenever someone comes to you and they say, "Oh, you work for The Mask," well, my favorite scene was with the dog. I bet loads of people say that.
Huh. Yeah, that my own thinking is the nightclub, which I've already told you, just because of the homage, I guess, to those great
30s.
cartoons. Yeah,
30s
exactly.
kind of, yeah, it was, and you know, it was the kind of, I've spoken to like the set decorator and the production designer, and it was just, you say, the influences, and it just all merged so well. You know, just these kind of, you know, it had a film noir feel, it had a cartoon feel. It was just all such a timeless look to the film. You know, it doesn't feel like any kind of period. You know, it's kind of contemporary, mix of like another time. You know, it's its own world, which I think is why it stands up so well. You know.
Now, how did you first see it, and then obviously become quite interested in it?
Well, I mean, I sort of grew up with the film, you know, like grew up
Okay.
with it, and then kind of during this pandemic, you know, there hasn't been much to do, and it was kind of rewatching films from childhood, and I produced a documentary on Ghostbusters, actually, the original Ghostbusters,
Oh, good.
which I'll have to show it to you. You know, the documentary is called "Cleaning Up the Town: Remembering Ghostbusters," and Steve Johnson's in it. You know, all the kind of visual effects guys. You know, I mean, a documentary you'll love.
I've got a story on Ghostbusters. So, as you'll remember, I guess it was in the second one where the Titanic shows up at a dock in New York. So we did that shot, and we built a model that was about I don't know, 10 feet long or something. It was to some scale, and it was going to then be integrated into this scene where all this crazy stuff starts to happen because of the energy of the ghosts or whatever it was
The
supposed
bad
to be.
vibes, the bad
Yeah.
vibes of New York. Yeah.
Okay, so we had a guy working for us. He was not involved in effects, but he worked in the purchasing department at ILM, and he and I were kind of friends, and occasionally we'd go out for a beer or something. And he wanted to get into production, but you know, that was a leap he hadn't made yet. So it turns out that this fellow is one of the leading experts in the world, amateur version of the Titanic, everything Titanic. He goes to New York every year to a meeting of the Titanic Society. He's read every book on the Titanic. He can go on for quite a while with stories about everything to do with the sinking of the Titanic and the rescue and all this. So he comes to me and he says, you know, that model that they've made of the Titanic, they've got the crash scar on the wrong side. Okay, so he says, I know it's a comedy and all, and I don't want to, you know, this is going to be costly to change, and I don't know what to do. I don't want my first bit of notice at the company to be, you know, me telling them they've screwed something up. So what should I do? And I said, well, you know, talk to the supervisor that's doing the shot, and then he can relay that to the studio, the producers, and see if, you know, what it means to them, and it won't reflect back on you at all. But internally, I mean, you work for us, so you'll get some credit that you're a smart guy and know about this. So they did mention it to the producers, and they said, oh, we got to fix that. I mean, I know it's a comedy, but we're not gonna have something in there that we know is wrong. So yeah, go ahead, we'll authorize that to be fixed. And so I always thought that was a funny story.
That is.
that
That is quite brilliant. No
no
one
one
knows.
would ever know. I
That
mean,
is
I can't tell you which side it was on, but if you're a Titanic person,
fanatic. Yeah.
fanatic,
Yeah.
that would be something you'd want to see done correctly, even in a comedy.
That is truly a great story. That's one I have to share for sure. That is amazing. Because
Well,
what
there's a
is
picture of the Titanic. I have the story in my book, and I have a picture of the model that they were working on, and you can't see whether there's which side it's on. I don't know when the photo was taken, but it gives you a rough idea of how we do things, you know, building these models at one time. And still, to a certain extent, models are still used in a lot of commercials, because everyone's always looking for a way to have things look different, especially in a commercial. Something different than everybody else is doing still works. And so that has given some new life to
an old
you know,
technique?
these great skills of these model makers. I mean, when people would come in to do a tour, I would have friends or someone would ask me to do a tour. I even gave George Lucas a tour once because they, you know, the head of our company said, you know, he needs to see some things that we're doing. And so, you know, why don't you take him around? And I said, okay. But when people would come in and what are you going to do? Take them to the computer graphics department and show them a room full of the gray computers? I mean, that's no fun. I would take them to the model shop, and that's where all this neat stuff was. I mean, you had the Ford Tri-Motor from Indiana Jones, and you had, you know, the Mummy.
Blade
Yeah,
Runner.
yeah,
Blade Runner
you
stuff
had
and
all these things that were just totally cool that you could relate to. As a matter of fact, one time I was working on a Saturday and there was a phone guy come in to fix the phones. And, you know, he's about 30 and had a couple little kids with him. So eventually I went over to him and I said, would it be okay if I took your kids and showed them like R2-D2 and Darth Vader and stuff? And he said, sure, go ahead. So we had, in those days, those models, mannequins were not in every video store in the country. You know, you didn't see these things. They were not around unless you somehow got into ILM. You weren't going to see them. So I took these kids over and I showed them Darth Vader and I showed them R2-D2, and I learned something here, and that is they were kind of impressed and interested, but without the music and the voice and the lighting, the magic is not there just in this mannequin, you know, in the dark cloak. And so it's like you said earlier, it's pulling all these things together that makes them work, whether it's a movie or whether it's just a single scene. That was a little bit of a revelation to me that, yeah, maybe the model of the Falcon or something would be interesting, but still, if it's not lit correctly, I think it tends to take some of the magic away. You know, I made a documentary on the making of Jurassic Park, and when it got done, the head of the company liked it. He sent it to George. George was really interested in it, especially in how much it cost. He wanted to know how much it cost to make it. And, you know, we kind of made it in our spare time. So it cost, I knew you could roughly say it cost some of our salaries and stuff. But Spielberg would not let us take it to a film festival because he didn't want the the technique to get ahead of the movie. He didn't want people to see anything about how it was done.
Knowledge.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he didn't want that. Now, today he wouldn't care. I'm pretty sure, but at the time. But the thing about it was that I don't think any one person in the company, including George Lucas himself, knew all the things that were recorded by that documentary. That all the artists that I went to and asked them about how they did certain things. Like, for instance, there was this one lady who did the surfaces. She painted the surfaces digitally, painted the surfaces of the dinosaurs. And she told me that originally they tried to do this procedurally, which is some CG magic word for, you do a little bit and then have the computer complete it. And she said it looked too perfect. It didn't have, nature. Nature's not perfect. You go out and look at a tree, there's all kinds of things. Look at the bark. And if you look at animals, they're each have a certain something to them that's organic like. And by doing it herself by hand, she could recreate that in a way that the computer would just replicate, not create. And as George famously says, they used to ask us all the time, well, when are you going to be able to do digital actors? And we always said, why would we want to do that? It would be too expensive. Actors are relatively cheap compared to trying to do it as CG. Plus, computers are not actors. They can't act. They can do a bunch of amazing things, but the human element, like the lady talking about doing the skin, how it has to be full of changes and errors, and like the bark on a tree. Those are the kind of things that you're searching for. I mean, we would all of the dinosaurs, we would make maquettes of them, and they would take them when they were shooting the backgrounds. They would take the maquette, which is just a simple model, but one that displays light well. They would take it out and put it in the scene where they were going to create the dinosaur, draw the dinosaur, so that the artist could see how the sunlight falls on an object like that, how it would fall. And then they would have that as reference so that they could, we were always trying to make it more realistic. And Dennis Muren is just a genius at this. When the dinosaur runs, he splashes water with his feet. We shot real water and had it splash as if the dinosaur had done it. We would add, we're trying to add weight. There's a tendency when you animate something that it will kind of bounce around in the scene and not look like it weighs 70 tons. So there are little tricks that every artist knows about how to give something weight. You're painting a car and you've got a little squish on the tires that no one is going to notice except if you point it out, but it hits you on an unconscious level. And that's why George was so good. The stuff he would put in the frame, and all these directors, the detail, the little things that you won't consciously notice, but you unconsciously notice them, and they sell the shot for you. And that's what you want to do. You want to sell it to the audience.
Absolutely. I mean, it's like when I was talking to Joey Alter, who was the one of the digital artists on the mask, and I think he worked on Jurassic as well. And I think he told me that actually the mask had more effect shots than Jurassic. He said that Jurassic had more kind of animatronic
Right.
effects. So I mean, I wasn't too sure if that was true or not, but
it seemed to me that that the mask did not have that many shots, but I'd have to go back to my notebooks to figure that out.
I think it's about 90 or 100 shots in the mask.
Yeah. Well, but they were, I think these guys would agree with me, they were a hell of a lot simpler shots than they were.
Yes.
I mean, we started doing so many shots. I mean, it was just you only have so much processing time, and you only have, these things would render overnight, and then you get to be able to see it. But there was a sort of a finite time to do this stuff. And as I used to say, the seats are sold, and I heard George Lucas, he got up from his seat after dailies one day, and he turned around and looked at us. This was on Jedi, and he said, "This movie is going to be released May 25th, 1983, basically come hell or high water. I don't care if it has temps in it. I don't care if it has black and white. It is being released. That's gonna happen." And that put some religion in us. He was never a screamer, but always we wanted to please him or any director. You want to help them fulfill this
vision
they have.
Yeah.
And
like you said about Eastwood, you said about Clint,
Yeah.
he liked the kind of the original effect, and then that you had,
as crude as it was, and it's not easy sometimes to describe what you want. You have to see it, or a sample. So to hire illustrators to come in and draw stuff and get the director focused on what he's trying to tell you. And that usually works out well. And if everything comes together, which it often doesn't, there's so many things.
So many elements.
It amuses me to read the criticism from people who really don't know how movies are made, have no idea, and they're talking to the actors who know even less than the reporters do about how to make a movie. They come in for 2 weeks and they're gone, and you see you at the premiere. A lot happens between the beginning and the premiere.
Exactly. I mean, it's something I was talking to Scott Squires about this, actually. I was saying, it's not just one person. I mean, so many people make a film. It's like a whole team. I mean, it's never one. I mean, like you say about people giving criticism about about your work, but they have no idea how much work that goes into it.
Right. And the number of people. One of the things I say in my book is, I am one of those people on that seemingly endless list of credits that runs at the end of major motion pictures. I'm one of those guys, and this is my story. That's the way I wanted the book to be told. Not a famous film director. I'm not a famous actor. I'm not even a famous visual effects person, but I worked in movies for a long time. I've got a lot of stories, and here it is from my perspective. And I open it with a quote, "We know the pharaohs well, but not the men who built their tombs." And I'm one of those guys, and there's dozens and dozens of them.
It's a great
hundreds of them on every film, and a lot of them are really talented and will never be heard from at all.
Exactly. I mean, this is why I want to do books in a way, because I feel like it needs to be archived, because
yes, well, you're doing it. You're doing it. You're putting some of these obscure people, such as myself, down on video. And I've done a few of these. I did a YouTube program.
I've seen it. Yeah.
Or something called Star Wars Theory. and it got 54,000 views, which is pretty decent.
That is pretty decent. I mean, the thing is, like, I think it's still, you know, me hearing this is fascinating, and other people hearing it, it will teach, and people will learn from it. You know, it's like cinephiles, or
Right.
you know,
Right.
it's education. It's educating, and it's keeping memories alive, like yourself. You know, you are an important, you know, to the progression of cinema. You know, and you know, your techniques are, you know, groundbreaking. Um, the
Well,
visual,
there's certainly some history there. There's some movie history there in this whole transition from photo optical to digital, and how hard Hollywood fought against it, just like they fought against VHS. George would, you know, George came up with digital editing with the Edit-Droid, which later he teamed with Avid. He came up with digital projection. He came up with THX to clean up the sound and the visual standards in theaters. He came up with computer animation that led to both Pixar and Jurassic Park. He had already made American Graffiti, a
yeah,
classic
classic film.
motion
Classic film.
picture.
In fact,
And
me, you know, that's one of
you know,
my favorites of his films.
yeah, I mean, that he introduces in that film this cross-cutting back and forth between the several characters through this one night. I mean, they didn't used to make movies like that, and now it's all over television and everywhere else. But that was a bit of a new storytelling technique, and it's very effective in going back and forth. You've got this character, and he gets to this certain point. I mean, if you look at a Seinfeld episode, I mean, basically one of the reasons that's so successfully in terms of storytelling is you've got you know, maybe 3 characters each episode, and each has something going, and at some point they come all together, and it comes from, you know, I'm not saying he invented it, but he certainly he put
Influence.
a fine point to it in American Graffiti.
Absolutely. I mean, like you say, you know, it definitely had an influence, as so do many other films as well. You know, I mean, there's like, I mean, that's a great film. I mean, American Graffiti is a great film, and you know, and if you look, he went on to bigger things, and you know,
Yeah.
totally another
Well,
level.
you know, I was reading somewhere the other day, he was being criticized for, oh, he could have done so much more as a director, and you know, he didn't do that. But his accomplishments to me put him way ahead of wherever Steve Jobs is going to arrive in history. Although Jobs did amazing things with Pixar, no question. But the things that I rattled off that George is responsible for, that he has done, and like I say, brought Hollywood kicking and screaming into the digital age. He put on a big show out at Skywalker Ranch for all the top directors in the country, and you know, maybe even in the world. There were some foreign directors there, and he brought computer graphic images of all kinds to show them, you know, we don't just do spaceships and stuff. And the director of Wall Street,
Oliver Stone.
Pardon?
Oliver Stone.
Oliver Stone, yes. He came up to George, apparently, I wasn't there, and said, well, you know, I don't need any of this stuff I make. I'm a film director, and I make blah, blah, blah. Well, a couple of months later, he called us, and he was working on one of I think the second Wall Street movie. And that sequence in the movie where the sort of
digital computer
ticker,
front, yeah.
the ticker is going up and down all the buildings in Wall Street. I'm pretty sure that we did that for him. So he did find that there's some things that were useful to him. And I gave a talk at a university, the University of Indiana at Bloomington, and I showed I worked on Saving Private Ryan, and I showed the sequence where the beachfront, the D-Day beachfront,
the intro,
before we worked on it, it was just, there was nothing there. There was sand and ocean and some of these metal things they put up as the Germans supposedly had put up as barricades. They're, you know, like big, huge steel crosses. They looked like I don't know. They looked like a children's toy from a distance. There were X's like that, you know, as barricades to the beach. Okay, and then I showed it again as the camera reveals the beach. Spielberg sent us this shot where it's a crane shot. It lifts up and it reveals the beach. So I ran it the way he sent it, where he reveals the beach and there's nothing there. And then we did it again. We added a bunch of stuff, and then the third time it was completely full of landing craft, you know, destroyers, weather balloons, soldiers, tanks marching up and down the beach, all of this stuff done. And so after the screening, these history professors came up to me and they said, "This is dangerous. You don't realize, don't you see what you've done here?" I said, "Look, we're making a movie, fellas. I mean, this is a motion picture. It's a recreation. No, but this could be so dangerous in the hands of." I couldn't talk them out of that. They were really upset because, like I said, they thought we just did spaceships and dinosaurs. They didn't realize that we could recreate history, that we could do things that you wouldn't even think about. Is not real. This is a total recreation. Now, I don't know how, like, you know, back in the days of Cecil B. DeMille, he probably would have had a bunch of soldiers and tanks and ships there. And we did it all with matte paintings and computer graphics. But I was impressed with how I couldn't talk these history professors out of the fact that we're doing something for entertainment. And, you know, like the great fear that people had that of their children reading comic books is really not going to hurt them, you know, I promise.
That's very interesting. Very interesting. So, I mean, what did you do after Saving Private Ryan? I mean, you went on to work with Friedkin as well on The Hunted, William Friedkin. You did The Hunted.
Let's see. I did The Hunted. Yes, that was you know, it was a pretty small project. You know, I can't even recall. I say in my book in the introduction that there's some films I don't have a big memory of. I mean, I remember working on it, but I didn't have the kind of interaction that I had on a lot of the other ones, where they were a long, involved project with a lot of shots. And I was lucky because in editorial, you're kind of the wheelhouse of everything at ILM, from the matte department to the optical department to the stage to the you know, the forest shoot up in Humboldt County for the background for the bike chase and Jedi. All of that and all the people came through editorial. And so I got to, you know, meet even occasionally a screenwriter and listen to their stories. So The Hunted, I remember something about a knife fight, and I haven't looked at that film in a long time. You know, I don't watch films over and over again, especially ones that I either made or worked on. And but I do occasionally run across them, and it's a pleasant experience to see them again. I don't think, like Charlie Chaplin said, that they had no idea that movies were going to have a life after they were released. In other words, it was yesterday's newspapers as far as he was concerned. He had no inkling. And he, in later life, he said, you know, they're calling me a genius and everything. He said, to tell you the truth, I was just trying to make Max Sennett laugh. If Max Sennett laughed, I was a happy boy. So, but it's wonderful that all these movies do still exist, and guys like you are going around documenting some of what went into them. I think it's great. Happy to do this.
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, like, I'm already working on like the third book, which is about a film that wasn't a total success, but it's called Soldier, and it starred Kurt Russell, and it was a bit of a science fiction western, but in kind of the mold of Shane, the 50s western,
right.
And I really liked it. I mean, you know, I'm admiring in it more than just its flaws and its reception, and the screenwriter actually gave me the original screenplay, which is no one has ever read, and it's phenomenal. It's actually phenomenal.
The screenplays often get sort of thrown out. Not always, but I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've asked my supervisor, Ken, of something about
Ralston.
how the movie was going. And yeah, Ken Ralston. Yeah. And he would say, oh, the director threw the script out, you know, 3 days ago. You know, but it's usually better if he doesn't throw the script out, but not always. Films are made in the cutting room, as I hope everybody knows by now, in large part. I mean, certainly a brilliant screenplay like Chinatown, I mean, one of probably the greatest original screenplays ever written, and films. But, you know, Polanski changed some things, like the ending. He changed the ending. And but I like it the way it is. I like
it the way it is. I mean, it's funny. I know, I don't know how you feel about it, but I really like the sequel, The Two Jakes, as well. You know, I mean,
you know, I thought he lost the thread there, but again, I haven't seen it lately, and I probably should go back. I just read the book about the making of Chinatown and how it changed Hollywood for those few years, those 70s films. And he does mention the Two Jakes, but it sounds like it got away from the director. But it's like something you see the Magnificent Ambersons by Orson Welles. I mean, it's just a brilliant movie, even though it's got problems. You know, the ending was taken over by the studio and they kind of screwed it up, but you can see what it could have been, and what it still is. I mean, it is a truly remarkable film.
In fact, I think as well, I reckon you'd actually like The Two Jakes more now. I mean,
yeah, it could be.
I think, because I think it's a film that grows on you. It's not like, if you separate it. What I look at is, I wish they did do a trilogy. You know, I wish that Jack Nicholson could play it, because the third one was going to be called Gitties versus Gitties, and it was going to be where he's like on his deathbed, you know, he's like his last legs, and he was really old, and that would have, they could do it now, I suppose, but I think Jack Nicholson's kind of retired, but you know, I would love to. Because The Two Jakes wasn't a success, you know, it wasn't a financial success.
Right,
so,
right.
I wish,
well, when you look at something like The Godfather, where the second movie, as brilliant as the first one is, the second movie is in ways even better. I mean, what a wonderful thing it was that he was able to do that. Then when he got to the third, that one kind of is a little squeaky, but I understand that he re-edited it.
That's
I
right.
think even maybe a third time. And I have yet, I can't remember whether I saw that version or not.
Because he's just released a director's cut. Actually, it was like the Godfather 3
Yes, right.
coda, and I still have yet to see it, but I didn't mind Godfather 3. But like you say, it's following two great films. It's always going to be hard to. You're following in. It's like Alien and Aliens. You're following in
Right.
two kind of filmmakers and films that are just set a standard.
It's like trying to do a remake of some classic movie, a different director 40 years later. It often doesn't work.
Actually, it's funny.
There are some exceptions.
Like Psycho. They did the original Hitchcock film, and then they did Gus Van Sant did the remake. And
right.
The original is a classic, and
yeah, it's tough to. It's tough. I just finished reading a book. Actually, I'm not totally through with it, I don't think, about Hitchcock. And unfortunately, it's more about, the psychology in his mind than stories about making the different films. But still, it's anything about movies interests me, and I'm anxious to read them.
It's like I'll have to also share with you an interview I did with this guy called he was a makeup artist, and his name was Jeff Goodwin, and he worked with Dennis Hopper and David Lynch on Blue Velvet, and he told me some truly amazing stories.
I'll bet.
And because Dennis Hopper actually he was yesterday was his birthday. Obviously, was the day he was born. So I was kind of posting up stuff about Easy Rider, and he's another one who kind of like launched a kind of new era of Hollywood in the way.
His I think it was Laszlo Kovacs was his cinematographer.
That's right. On the last picture,
on Easy Rider.
Easy Rider, and I think they did the last picture as well. They both worked on that as well.
So he came to ILM. I wish more of these guys had been able to tell stories like he did, but I think we ran Easy Rider, and then he told us some stories about it. And he said, I'd done a lot of motorcycle pictures, and I didn't want to do another motorcycle picture, which is what he saw Easy Rider as. But he said the way Dennis explained it to me, that it was really actually a tragedy. And he said, when I looked at it in that light, I thought, I think maybe something's here. And so he agreed to do it, and I'm glad he did.
Look and behold, the way that film is shot.
Yeah.
And it,
the politics of it too.
Oh yeah, it's relevant. It's
today.
Relevant. Oh, it's relevant. Totally relevant.
And have you ever seen Dennis's still photographs?
Yes.
They are great.
He was a real artist. He was totally.
Yes.
Just an amazing filmmaker, actor. He's just one of a kind.
Yes. Right.
There was a film that he directed. I think it was in 1988. It was called Colors. Robert Duvall and Sean Penn, which is another kind of relevant film. But his story, his storytelling, he just made told great stories and made great films, and
it's a documentary that was made about him.
The Uneasy Rider.
Is that what it's called? I saw it a long time ago at a film, not a festival, but in Berkeley, they had a great museum of film, and Pacific Film Archive, and that shows him, warts and all, the great artist. That's where I saw his still photos for the first time, and that's when he was getting a little crazy with the drugs and stuff, but it was he was quite a he was talented, but he was also well read and knowledgeable.
Oh, he was totally very intelligent, so intelligent,
Right.
and wild and unique, definitely. But yeah, no, so intelligent and well read, and I mean, he was
Right.
About culture, and
So was
the
Brando.
arts, and Brando as well. Yeah,
Brando,
Nicholson as well.
they made a
Nicholson.
lot of, the press made a lot of fun of Brando, but Brando was really, if you listen to what he said, right on.
Totally. I mean, there was a good. I must watched it with my
You need
dad
to get a
actually.
glass of water.
Oh, sure.
Okay, Doc, you can cut that out.
That's okay. Yeah, no.
Which reminds me, what are you going to do with this?
I'll probably put it on YouTube or Facebook if that's
Do what?
put it on YouTube,
Oh, okay.
or Facebook, or put it on Facebook or YouTube. And
Okay.
I think it's great because just listening to this is really fascinating. I mean, and I love someone who also loves movies, and especially not just ones you've worked on, but also to talk about film, and yeah, especially I mean, like saying about Brando, actually going back to Brando, he was yeah, very intelligent, and completely just an outsider, just he was he was unique as well, like as unique as Hopper and all those kind of.
Yeah, there's a
kind of
great there's a great story about how the studio was absolutely against having Brando in The Godfather, and Coppola has to go and talk to the chairman of Gulf and Western. He actually, at one point, Coppola, after the guys told him absolutely no, Coppola falls to the floor and sort of just pleads, and the head of Gulf and Western finally he says, well, if he'll do this and this and this, which were like sort of impossible, he has to do a screen test, he has to put up a bond, in case he fails to show up, and I forget what the third thing was. So Coppola talks about going and shooting this screen test, and Coppola set out like some cheese and some salami. It was over at his house, Brando's house, and then Brando comes out and just starts going into this other character. He darkens his hair, he puts it up, he starts wandering around and picking up the salami and the cheese, and starts doing this voice, and just becomes this character, and that got him the job. I think they showed it to Bloodhorn, and he said okay, and they eventually dropped any actual screen test, and I don't think they had to force him to do a bond either. But
no, because I remember, I mean, because obviously they said, oh, he was difficult to work with and he's notorious and all the rest of it. But I think as well, when he won the Oscar, when he got the Oscar for The Godfather, he didn't accept it. He sent
Right.
up the Indians to
Indian lady, yeah.
Indian lady, and which I think is quite bold, because he got at them another way, so he kind of, he was he wasn't he was very out kind of yeah.
Well,
You know,
if you think through his position on the Indians in this country, the American Indian, and what they've gone through,
oh, totally. I mean,
how they should be respected. I mean, it's pretty difficult to argue with his case.
he was
And
right. I mean,
oh,
I
absolutely.
mean,
But the media made fun of it.
I think it was good that he did it. You know, it's good. I think it was good. You know, I mean,
Right.
you know, I mean, he would, like you say, he would have been attacked. The media attacked him, or he would have been attacked. But I think
Yeah.
he did a good thing. You know, he did a good thing. And there was actually, I mean, I remember his earlier work with Kazan, and there was a great film that he did with a director called Gilo Pontecorvo, and it was called Burn, which I recommend if you haven't seen it.
No, I haven't seen that.
Brando says it's his favorite performance
Well,
and
really?
favorite film. Burn. It's
Burn.
it's kind of a the director Gilo Pontecorvo. He was kind of a social realist director, and it's a truly an amazing. I mean, forget The Godfather. I mean, this film is truly something special. And
I'll look that up.
Oh.
You know, I don't know if it's true or not, but you know, of course, Brando had such an amazing career, huge stardom, you know, from a very early age, and then all the other things that he went through. But I read one time that he said, excuse me, that his tombstone was gonna say, what was that all about? That's all I was gonna say. I always thought that's such a great commentary on a life. You know, it's right up there with Shakespeare's A Tale Told by an Idiot, signifying nothing. I thought Brando had his own take on that. What was that all about?
That's a great, you know, I mean, it's funny. I was with my dad recently, and we watched a documentary on Sky Arts about Brando, and it's funny that we're speaking about it now, but it was like it was just about, you know, he was, and it's quite sad with his son. You know, you know, it was very sad. You know, it was very sad, and I mean, as well, you know, it's funny. He worked obviously with Coppola again, didn't he, on Apocalypse Now, and that was another crazy kind of crazy film to work on, you know, but an absolute masterpiece of film, you know.
Yeah, and that really holds up. What they went through, what Coppola went through to get that thing made, and then that the way he edited it and presented it, you know, in the end, just brilliant.
I mean, it was like about madness, and it was like totally mad to make the film as well.
Right, exactly.
You know? I mean, it was like captured. I mean, if you look like Dennis Hopper, I mean, and Brando, and it was just, and Duvall, and all these. I mean, it was just completely like you're on an acid trip, you know, like you're totally. Yes. It's just. I mean, it was just like a. There'll never be a film like it again. You know, they wouldn't make a film like that now. You know, you know,
the use of the helicopters and the music, and that whole opening thing, and the voiceover. You know, you often hear people, especially in screenwriting, say, you know, you shouldn't use voiceover, and well, take a look at Apocalypse. Take a look at Sunset Boulevard. Take a look. I mean, there are some really, really great uses of voiceover, and Apocalypse is one of them.
Oh, Taxi Driver as well, which is another one.
Yeah,
you know, an effective use of it as well. I mean, totally. Apocalypse Now. Just you're going inside the mind of someone who's
exactly. You know, and to be able to do that. You know, of course, a lot of books don't translate well to the screen because they have that interior dialogue, monologue, whatever you want to call it, with the reader that's difficult to make visual and make work. But there are instances where it can be done. And I admire the screenwriters that can condense these things and put them, make them work. There's a great little YouTube clip of Coppola talking about how he wrote The Godfather, how he took the pages out of the book and he pasted them into this folder so that in such a way that he could see both sides of the page, and thus have less pages. So he cut a hole in the paper and taped it all on there, and then put all his notes, and then took this book with him to the shoot and to remind him, okay, this is what this scene is about. This is what you must have it deliver as through the acting and the cinematography. And some of those things, like when I taught film, I would have the students look at the famous scene where Michael decides he's going to go shoot the bad guy. And I have them watch it without the sound so that you can see the camera work and how the camera is slowly tracking in to a close-up of Michael. And that's one thing. But then you listen to it without the sound, without the picture. You just listen to the dialogue, the soundtrack, and the payoff to the scene when you finally get to his face. His last line is, "And then I'll kill them both." And that's then when you put those two together. If you don't look at them separate, you can't study it. You get caught. It's so great, you just get caught up in it. But if you do that, it's just a little trick. In learning how to make movies, I would record the soundtrack. I would sneak a recorder into the theater and record the entire movie. Then I would listen to this, and it makes you realize how the dialogue, how important it is, how it sets up scenes, how the music, how there's this whole other level going on behind the audience that is not apparent to them because they're caught up in the rush of the thing. And to study it, if you just listen to the track and see how important those actors' voices are. I mean, a lot of these actors came out of radio, came out of vaudeville in the early days, I mean, but still those voices are so important to the drama and, the music and all these other things that people don't think about unless you separate them out and say, okay, here's the visuals, here's the track, here's the two together. It's a great learning experience.
Absolutely. I mean, it's like one of my favorite films is Abel Ferrara's Bad Lieutenant with Harvey Keitel, and it's like a documentary almost. But I think the song by Johnny Ace is so well effectively used
right.
for the film. I can't imagine. I mean, there's virtually no music in it. That's the only song used. But it's
George has said that when he was writing American Graffiti, he was listening to all those songs that eventually wound up in the movie. And when he was editing it, of course, he laid them in. And then he had to talk the studio into putting up the money to buy the rights to all this classic rock and roll and stuff. And that was a battle. And then when he gets done, he and Coppola take American Graffiti to the North Point Theater in San Francisco, which at the time was a really great place to see a movie. And the head of the studio said it was unreleasable. He couldn't stand it. He hated it. And Coppola, the story goes, pulled out a checkbook and said, I will buy it from you. And luckily for the studio, they didn't sell it to him, because this movie cost $750,000 to make and grossed $50 million. And that's why George got where he got, because movies are never supposed to pay anything to the director in net points. But once in a while, there's a movie that makes so much money, there's no place to hide it in bookkeeping. And I think George got 3 or 4 million out of it, which was a lot of money in 1977 or so.
I mean, how much would that be now? I mean, that would be.
Yeah, it would be a lot. It would be.
It's funny. I mean,
in fact, my bank, my uncle ran the Bank of America branch in San Anselmo, California, where George lived then and lives now. And my uncle told me that one day this couple came in to open a checking account. And so he got them their checking account going and everything. And occasionally they would call him if they had, something that to do with banking that he could help them. So he got to know them. And one day, Marcia Lucas came in alone and handed my uncle a check for deposit. And he said, I looked at the check and I looked at Marcia and I said, Marcia, where did you get all this money? Well, that was the royalties from graffiti. He wound up buying the oldest house in Marin County, where he still lives. Lives a lot of places, but that's one of the places he lives.
That's one of the places, yeah. I mean, it's funny as well, like, say, for instance, there's a prime example where this basically changed the industry big time, and that was Michael Cimino's Heaven's Gate. And that was like, that changed like creative control of directors, and just the, obviously because it was such a financial disaster. I mean, I love the film. It's an amazing film. It's an amazing film. If you look at it now, it's so highly regarded as a piece of art. I mean, it's like a painting. And but yeah, when it came out, it was just because it didn't make any money.
I went to see the movie in San Francisco. I got up to the door, and the door opened, and a guy came out, and he said, "You're not thinking of going to see that movie, are you?" And I said, "Well, yes, I was." He said, "Don't. It's terrible." So I didn't see it. I didn't see it until years later.
What was your?
I don't even remember what my reaction to it was. So it didn't make a major impression. But I'm glad to hear you say that, and I'm going to take another look.
Yeah, because they it was because he passed away a couple of years ago, but they kind of released a director's cut or a kind of remastered print, which is beautiful, and that was like it is like the cinematography is just it's just I think you'd appreciate it.
Well, I loved Days of Heaven. I don't know if you know that film, Terrence Malick.
Badlands.
Yeah. That cinematography, Days of Heaven, and the music and all just blew me away. So I'm anxious to see the Michael Cimino one.
Oh, you'd love it. I mean, it's like he did. I think obviously after that he didn't do as many films, but he did The Year of the Dragon, which is quite a good good thriller set in Chinatown in New York, and then he did Desperate Hours, which was a remake of a Bogart film, and then he did The Sicilian, which was, I think that was written by Mario Puzo, who did The Godfather, and that was with Christopher Lambert, and I think that was
there's a wonderful story in Mario Puzo's The Godfather Papers. So he was this failed novelist. He was the guy in his family said that everybody took pity on and had to support. And he said he got so low one time he had a appendicitis, and he said, I fell out of the taxi cab. I couldn't afford to get it. Just goes through all this stuff. And then he gets this huge success with The Godfather, because he was telling some stories about the mafia at his publishers, and somebody came through, heard some of it, and said, you write that down and I'll pay you money for it. So he went off and he wrote this. All right. So they asked Puzo, a reporter asked him after The Godfather had come out and he was rich and famous and everything. They said, what was it like to go from that to here? And he said, it was like hearing that you don't have to die. I thought that was such a great line.
That is a great line. I mean,
that's how important it was to him.
I mean, because as well, I don't know if you know this, but they're doing a film about the making of The Godfather. You know,
I did hear something about that. That scares me. I hope I don't know who's doing it. You know, like for instance, they just did Mank about the making.
Yeah, which is a black and white. Fincher, wasn't it? Fincher. Yeah.
David Fincher. David Fincher worked at ILM back in the Matt department, and was just, you know, some kid. And then he went off and made some music videos. And then the next thing I heard, he was dating Madonna. So that's how fast that happens. But I couldn't get with Mank. I mean, there's no greater film buff or lover of Wells and Citizen Kane. And I did enjoy it as a film nut, but I found it tough to, you know, as a movie. I don't know. What was your reaction? I mean,
yeah. I mean, I'd have to go back and watch some of the Orson Welles films and study them, and then again and kind of compare them. But yeah, I mean, I thought it was. I mean, it was good, but like, I mean, how did you feel about it? I mean, you just didn't?
I just didn't like. One thing I've said about the later Star Wars movies that Disney's making, I've said, people ask me, what do you think of them? And I said, they appear to me to be Star Wars movies about Star Wars rather than something
new story,
new.
something new.
A new. And that's one of the things George said. He said, there's nothing new in this. I mean, he would not release a movie without some cool new gadgets, stuff, armament, characters, something. And they seem to have lost that. And so I guess that the Mank movie seemed more like a documentary than a movie. Although I probably have to look at it again in a year or so.
I mean,
I just loved his Social Network, what he did with that. I mean, God, that was.
I mean, I liked obviously The Game with Michael Douglas and Sean Penn, which was quite a good thriller. I don't know if you've seen that. The Game.
No, the Game.
The Game, yeah, with Michael Douglas.
I don't think I have.
Got to see it. Check it out. Don't read anything. Just watch it. That's all I've got to say. Just watch it.
Okay.
I think you'll like it.
Okay. Well, I'm game.
The Game, yeah, The Game, and then he did Panic.
I'm saying I'm game.
Your Game, yeah.
I'm game to see The Game.
Yeah, and Panic Room as well he did, and Fight Club, and Seven.
Yeah, I saw some of those. I've seen Seven.
Seven, all right.
Yeah. Well, he's a really fine director, and there's an interview that I saw with him. You know, it was one of these YouTube things that gave me some more insight, because I haven't really known him and since he was you know, a young guy kicking around ILM that nobody was paying any attention to particularly. except the girls. He was good looking.
But yeah,
Well,
yeah. I mean, Curious Case of Benjamin Button as well. He did that
yeah,
film as well, and
yeah, that's a F. Scott Fitzgerald story, right?
that's right. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Because I know it was in development for so long, but they didn't have the technology to do it. You know,
right, to do the Asian thing. Yeah. Well, he knows a lot about visual effects for obvious reasons because he worked there at ILM, and he also was a type of person that looked into stuff, like Ron Howard. I mean, not many actors can make the transition for one thing, can make the transition from child actor to actor, which he was able to do. And also to be able to get interested in what goes on behind the camera and figure all that out is just very few examples.
and sort of as a filmmaker as well. You know, I mean,
Yeah. And when he brought Cocoon to us, that was one of the only other films that I can remember. He decided he was going to show it to his producer, Richard Zanuck and Lily Zanuck. And so, they called me up, can we get the screening room? Yes. The guys brought it over and they ran it, and I sat in the back of the theater and watched it. And from the get-go, even though it was just like the first director's cut or something, it was magic. You could just tell this is really going to be good, even with all the rough spots. Whereas I sat down one day and pulled out the original work print for the original cut of Star Wars, and I put it on the chem, and I said, let's have a look. So it was a picture track and a sound 35 millimeter soundtrack, and I started to run it, and it was so goofy because there was no music, there was no ADR for the dialogue, there were no effects, there was no special effects shots, no nothing, and it was a bunch of stormtroopers running around, and they're firing their guns, and the guns are just going, with a little bit of spark coming out the end. There's no lightsabers, and it looked awful. And I know that a lot of the people that worked on the original film, thought, boy, this is a disaster. And it was just one of those things that you couldn't tell what the heck it was going to be until it all came together. And that's another example where you wouldn't want just anybody seeing your movie. I mean, because look what happened to Coppola. He almost got fired off the Godfather because the studio hated the footage that was coming in. And so he knew that the cinematographer was telling stories to the studio. So he fired the guy, knowing it would take till Monday to get a new cinematographer. And he had that time to do some politics. And by the time Monday came around, he was back in charge.
That is, like you say, that's where, I mean, we'll see what happens with that kind of making of film. You know, I mean, we'll see what will happen. You know, I mean,
yeah, right. I hope the best for them, because I'd really like to see it be successful and see it. I'm kind of hoping they get a documentarian in there, at least as an advisor, because it's a little tricky to do these
kind of bio kind of behind the scenes stuff, because
just as what my wife calls a biopic. She was a screenwriter for a while. A biopic is tough, to make it work, and to compress the time as much as is necessary.
It's getting it right, because like I said, there's going to be things that you can't put in and stuff you take out, and It's remember they did Hitchcock with Anthony Hopkins, and I'm sure there's stuff in the film where it's not all of it is in, but they say you have to condense it. You have to. It's very hard. It's hard to. It's a hard thing to do. It's
right. I mean, you have to kill your little darlings, as they say, and not everybody can do that. Throw out stuff was great and was so hard to shoot and all, but doesn't belong there anymore. So that's where a good editor comes in, and I had that. I was so close to this film I made, American Nitro, that I brought in another editor, and he said, look, here's what we're going to do. We're going to make a good reel and a not so good reel, and then start re-editing after we make those decisions, which he, helped me make. And so that was a learning experience about how to get rid of stuff that was so damn difficult to achieve. Because we were out there on these race tracks with these 2,000 horsepower cars that were
nitro
capable of, nitro doesn't burn, it explodes. And they would do these 6-second runs, burning 6 gallons of nitromethane at the height of the gas crisis in America. And I thought, if I could just record this, just not have any voiceover or anything, just have them tell the story, just switch on a camera amongst all this craziness and see what I can record. And that's what I did. And that film, it's now pushing 40 years old, and I still sell it almost every other day on DVD. And I have 732,000 fans of it on Facebook.
That's
the
amazing.
Facebook,
I mean, is
the
it available?
Facebook page for American Nitro.
Is it available? Is it
The
available on
importance of owning your own films. Charlie Chaplin owned his films. Buster Keaton did not. Chaplin wound up in a chalet in Switzerland, and Keaton wound up in the Valley in LA. George owned his own films. And the other thing about George, he never took public money. Any Tom, Dick, and Harry with a brilliant idea in Silicon Valley now can go public and become a billionaire. Try it selling movie tickets. That's where his fortune came from, selling movie tickets. Quite an accomplishment.
Very much so.
I don't think many people will be doing that again.
No, not again. No, I mean, it's going through another change now, aren't we? I don't know what's going to happen, but who knows?
Right.
I mean, cinema will never be the same, certainly.
No. Well, after this, I mean, it was on shaky legs before this crisis, and now it has sped up. Its own demise. Although I will say that some of the films that worked in theaters, especially these big special effects films, they don't work too well on a small screen. I mean, certainly not as well as in this giant theater with things booming and crashing and that sense of the audience and all. So
the scale.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see if that has any effect on where people want to see their entertainment, or at least certain kinds of entertainment. I mean, for myself, there's a lot of films I miss simply because I didn't get out to the theater, and I'd like to be able to see them at my option. So I'm okay with the same day and date release. I think that's great. Guys like me will be able to see things that we wouldn't ordinarily see until it gets to disc of some kind. But The motion picture business is the fastest return on capital in the history of capitalism. So let's say you build a Bank of America building back in 1973, and it costs $100 million. In order to get your return on that money, it's going to take a decade at least of rents coming from the building. You release a motion picture that costs $100 million, and if it's a smash, you can make it back in 2 months. There's nothing ever been like that.
No.
It's that kind of return is beyond, Broadway, it's huge, but it's not worldwide. One day I was over in the business office at Lucasfilm, and they had all of the cities that the film was playing in all over the world. Well, you know how many cities in the world there are? A lot. And then when you think about how many movie theaters there are in all those cities all over the world, and we were playing in all of them, I mean, that's huge. It's monstrous as far as getting your investment back. Yet, Bank of America told George when he went to fund The Empire Strikes Back, sequels don't make money. That's what they told him.
And look what happened.
Yeah, and look what happened, right? So,
Wow.
are we done? Maybe
Yeah.
that's.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, I mean, that's
I've talked your ears off here. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I've loved it. It's fantastic. No, it's
give it a little editing, and which I'm sure you're capable of, and that'll tighten some stuff up maybe. But I was happy to do it, and let me know when you have it up there somewhere. And just as a closing reminder to your audience, I wrote this book. No employee has ever written a book about Lucasfilm. I'm the only one, and you can find it in any bookstore. Just ask for it, and of course, it's on Amazon, where you can also buy it.
And I'll put the link under the video as well.
Right.
So yeah, thank you for your time. And
now,
thanks, Bill.
where are you? Where are you right now? Are you in London, or are you in?
No, I'm just outside London.
Okay, I was just curious where you were located.
Yeah, just outside London. So, I mean, have you been to the UK before? Or?
I have not. I've been to France. I've been to a bunch of places, but next trip, that's where I'm headed.
Yeah, Steve. Yeah, it'd be great. Hopefully, if I could see you. I mean, like Steve Stas Williams said when he comes over, we'll probably meet up. So hopefully as well, I'll give you a copy of the book, which would be nice. So,
Okay.
I'll send you a copy anyway, regardless.
Okay.
So,
Now, during our conversation, there's been a few times where it said, your internet speed is low, and you just froze there for a second. So you might be missing some stuff. I don't know.
Oh no, I think it's I'll check it, but I think it'll be fine.
So, yeah. Okay. Good.
But yeah. And keep safe and well, and and all the best as well.
Okay.
And I'll keep in touch. I mean, always good. I'll post. I'm always posting stuff anyway, videos and interviews. So yeah, just and check out the game with
Mike
Douglas and Burn with Brando. You'll love Burn.
Okay.
Martin Brando and Heaven's Gate. Heaven's Gate as well. Yeah.
Okay. For sure. Thank you.
You take care.
Bye.
See you.